Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Create the Ripple podcast. I'm your host, Candice Smiley. Here we trust the niggle and we tell the truth. This is a podcast. We are looking to have conversations that matter, conversations that take courage to engage in, where we cut through the noise that exists online to bring you incredible content, amazing speakers, and stories to inspire you to live your best, listen to yourself, and tell the truth of who you are and who you just might become. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Create the Ripple podcast. I'm your host, Candice Smiley. And today we are going to talk about trusting the niggle and telling the truth. Now, it's a little bit different of an episode today because I'm going to be interviewing an incredible human being who's all about marketing. So this is definitely going to be one for those of you who are mompreneurs, entrepreneurs, somebody who would like to be an influencer, who wants to leave a legacy of impact. So Ryan is an ad agency veteran. He is a successful entrepreneur and he's a marketing influencer. He has a company called Radical. This is his marketing agency, which is actually one of the fastest growing ad agencies in the Southeast. Ryan has worked with brands like Verizon, Lexus, and even with the NFL. He's the host of his own podcast called Radcast, which is actually a top 25 US marketing podcast. What stood out for me is his tagline, which is people, marketing, inspiration. And one of the key things that jumped off from the description of the podcast on his website, radcast.com, is to laugh while you learn. So I'm going to invite you to grab a pen and paper, or if you're listening to us while you're on the go, I know a lot of people listening while they're busy doing. We're definitely a doing while listening podcast. But I would invite you to just tune in because we drop quite a few amazing little nuggets, things you can take and immediately apply. Our show notes for this particular episode are filled with links and value increase add things for you to check out. So make sure you do that. And without any further ado, we're going to jump in as Ryan shares where he started to where he is today. Enjoy the show. So how did you become the marketing guru that you are today?
Well, that's a long, winding path. I've done 22 years. I'll give the condensed story. Born and raised in South Carolina and, grew up with a family of entrepreneurs. And I think that was inbred in me growing up. Grew up in the lower middle class, I like to say. We had what we needed, but not a lot of what we wanted. But I was taught early on to kind of go after things and learn how to be an entrepreneur and learn how to make money in a lot of different ways. And I think that had an impression on me. I went into marketing out of high school, one of the few people that actually, stuck with a major in college and was a marketing major, and actually went on after school to go straight into ad agency world. So I worked for the largest agency in South Carolina. It was called Irwin Penland at the time. They've condensed it to EP & Co. now. So trendy. Good marketing there. But I worked there for 13 years. It was a very entrepreneurial company and agency, and I thrived within that kind of agency environment, taking on multiple roles, getting promoted a lot, and then ultimately opening their New York office about 9 years into it. We were in South Carolina. We had some client business that had expanded. It really needed a leadership role in New York. And so I've never been one to turn away from a challenge and kind of put my name in the hat, and had some clients that wanted me there. And so strategically made the move to New York and ended up working for the parent company of Irwin Penland Hill Holiday, as well as EP, working on large national clients, Verizon, Samsung, Motorola, Apple, small companies, but got the benefit of learning, from the best, the brightest in the world, while having a say and sitting at the C-suite and counseling some of the largest brands in the world on marketing, what I learned of the last 10 years at the time. And I think I was always a little ahead of my time in the field. At 28, 29, sitting at some big tables with some big people and not being afraid to speak up and having opinion, and kind of knowing and understand the intricacies of consumer behavior and what make marketing tick. But also learning and absorbing. I'm a very curious person. I think most entrepreneurs are. I think most true marketers are highly curious. And, I absorb a lot. I ask a lot of questions. And then I'm not afraid to kind of speak my mind. dangerous combination.
I was going to say, yeah, that curiosity is definitely something I've run into. I've dabbled in marketing compared to your background, but I'm always curious, like, what if we did this? Like, what would happen if, and how come this is? So I love that. Continue.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things I get asked a lot, what makes people successful? Like, it's one of my like top 5 things I think you have to be. If you're not curious, I think you kind of just accept things and you go with the flow. And most people that just kind of go with the flow are working for other people and probably just, they kind of exist. I know it's not that simple, and I'm not really faulting anyone as much as I'm kind of elevating those that are curious, perhaps. But I think it's a significant characteristic. But, learn from the best and brightest in New York. Moved back to South Carolina about 5 years ago. I was a CMO for a couple of companies, but again, involved in some startups. But marketing has been the thread of my whole career. And started Radical, which is our digital ad agency here in Greenville. We work with national and international clients and, have been in this role for a long time. And then, just like what you do, I started a podcast 4 years ago called the Radcast, which is a marketing and business podcast. So marketing is just kind of always, that journey has just always been a thread in what I've done and what I've been good at. And I want to, I guess, again, back to, being blessed to be one that kind of saw that path and took it. And it's been a journey along the way.
That's awesome. Well, when I had a chance to check out your podcast, kudos. You've had a ton of success with that. So obviously for my listeners, we're going to have all the links for them to be able to go check that out, your website and that sort of thing down below in our show notes and comments. But one of the things I love that you had as your tagline is people, marketing, and inspiration. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think, the thread of those things are back to, we're talking about being curious and we're talking about like certain characteristics. But at the end of the day, and we preach this at the agency, we're all human and everyone has a story. And I think when I started the podcast, the people part of it was like, I wasn't going to just be a monologue and, come on. And I want to educate. I have a lot to share. And I think I do that. But I wanted it to be through the story of other people, much like we're doing here, but hearing other people's stories, bringing the humanity and making, their journey. Everyone has a chance to inspire someone else. And a lot of the people I have on now, especially at the scale and scope of most of the people coming on, they know are purposely inspiring, but we still have a lot of entrepreneurs on sometimes that have amazing stories that I know can inspire others. And so I just believe that journey and that inspiration and hold through humanity, it can come back to marketing though, because again, I preach the power of personal branding and influence and all those things. And I think the thread of all of those tends to come out one way or another.
No, I really love that. I love that you had people first because, well, that's just core for me. 3 core values for me are connection, communication, and collaboration. So I had my start as an event planner and I haven't really been able to get away from events. I'm often marketing for events or putting people together and really it's all about connection, right? And then that collaboration piece of like what we're doing here today, right? You're reaching an audience and we're reaching an audience. I'm curious, what are 3 simple pieces of advice? Advice feels like the wrong word as I was making my notes of questions I wanted to ask you. So I was like, are there 3 rules you'd recommend, 3 pieces of advice? Like we're talking simple bite size. If somebody listened to this and then went off and did it, they might see a bump in their marketing or their impact, more than just the marketing, their impact.
Yeah. The biggest things that I coach on are, and these are in no order. You can even move them around. First thing is consistency. I think a lot of people in marketing and branding, they don't stick with a message and, defining what that core message is and sticking with it and having consistency. It's interesting to me, especially with social media. If you think about the parallels of like other media channels, like TV, outdoor, some traditional channels that have been around forever versus social media, you think about how many times do you see the same commercial? Hundreds, thousands, same message over and over and over. There's a reason that those brands that have millions and billions of dollars repeat those messages to you is because that's what seeds the message and what has impact because of that consistency and that frequency. And I think no matter how big or small someone is, there's always this tendency to kind of, well, is this working or that working? And then not to have that consistency. That's a major key. Another thing is, and that's funny, I posted this to social media today, and a lot of the things that I post, I kind of blend personal development and marketing and all these things because they actually play together so well, ironically. But if you aren't clear where you're going or who you're targeting, all roads lead to nowhere. So what do I mean by that? The riches are in the niches, and you have to be hyper targeted on who you're going after, and you got to stay consistent towards that target. And I work with companies now, big, small, large, individual people, helping them build their personal brands, which I know we'll get into. But like the biggest thing I see is their targets are too broad, too wide, and narrowing in on it, that exact target and knowing exactly the problems you're solving for a very niche audience and then being consistent. Those things play together. And so again, hyper targeted on who you're going after and what you're selling. Lastly, this is one of those things, like one of the people that I follow, believe it or not, I absorb a lot of content, but there's not a ton of thought leaders that I really like, not because I'm judging or like, oh, they just don't teach me anything, but like a lot of the stuff I see, I've done for a long time, but like the ones that consistently kind of challenge me, Christopher Lochhead is a brilliant mind, and his shtick, if you call it, his thing is all about category creation. And really what it comes down to is back to creativity and other things. But he believes that if you aren't doing legendary things and kind of creating categories, and what do I mean by categories? That would be almost like, Uber, kind of created the category. Category creation and the creativity in what you're offering to people will always allow you to break through. And so if you're someone out there and you're a small business, you're like, well, I'm selling insurance or I'm doing something, but there's still always a chance to pivot, and to be a little different. And that might be a pivot in the target, a pivot in the message. But I think some semblance of those, I don't know if those were as bite-sized as you wanted, but.
Perfect. No, I'm glad you drove some of those points home, because I would agree with you on every single point, especially on that one about niching, right? So often people are almost scared to really define that space, and then who are they going after and what does that look like? And then that consistency, right? It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's going to the gym or getting your marketing sorted out. Consistency plays such a role in that long-term success.
The last thing I would say, and this is probably a little more bite-sized, I'll throw in a lucky extra. My marketing extra. So I say this a lot. People think with their heads, they buy with their hearts.
Always.
Emotion in your messaging and in your marketing drives purchase behavior. And I always encourage people, you need to educate or entertain. If you can do both, and entertainment's an emotion too, by the way, obviously, most people think emotional, it's sad. No, emotion can be lots of laughing too. And so that's one of the key things, because a lot of people get too caught in my product or service and every feature or benefit, but emotional triggers is what drives purchase behavior.
I love that. I read the book When. I'm not sure if you had a chance to read it. I forget who wrote it, but just understanding a lot of those reasons why people purchase, just fascinating. Like, can geek out on that for a very long time. I love that you said it's about laughing while you learn. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, you are a good host. Timing is perfect. Right, with that emotion, you nailed it. And it's what I just said. Like, there's a lot of business and marketing shows, and there's a lot of business and marketing people. I find, whether or not I'm funny or not, I don't know, but I kind of have a lightheartedness to myself. I don't take myself nearly as seriously as I think people may have thought. I think people now that are getting to know me better, in a more my persona and social media, but I like to tell it through a lighthearted lens and to have fun with it. And be cynical in a fun way, not in like a make fun way, like making fun of them in a bad way. In our show, I think especially because we have two sides, we have our interviews and then we have our marketing news. And I think especially in our marketing news episodes, we, let our hair down. We talk about very topical things, but we have fun with it. We're not afraid to call a spade a spade. And I think most people in the feedback we get, have a little bit of a smile while they're listening to most of the content. And I think, laughter is really important. Humor is just super important to me. And again, we're not a comedic show. It's not a comedy, but I think we all take ourselves a little too seriously and think, let's just call a spade when you're talking, especially the topics like NFTs and fungible tokens and the metaverse and goggles and AR and VR. Like, you hear yourself talk sometimes, and we talk about it, and normally I'm talking to a client, and I'm like, I just want to even though it's very much our reality that we're moving into, it's all a little funny. I mean, it's all a little cynical that if you heard yourself saying these things 5 or 10 years ago, you just go,
yes.
What?
Yes. I can remember when I realized that, I'd shifted from using social media as a way to connect, as a way now to really connect and communicate more than connect. How ironic that was, and I had to tell people all the time, no, I'm not on social media because I'm playing or wasting time. This is work. And that was quite that boggled the mind for a little bit.
Yes.
I'm curious. Favorite book?
Oh, there's a lot.
I know. That's why I asked, because
I know
it never fails, right?
Yes, I know. Trying to think of something that's super, maybe universal or something.
Super nerdy or smart or something.
Well, not as nerdy. I'm trying to remember. I just went blank on the first name of it, but it's The Art of Why Things Catch On. It's called, oh my goodness, brain freeze. I'll come back to it. I'll tell you about it and then it'll make me think of it. But it's all about consumer behavior and why certain things catch on and certain things don't. And what are the triggers that make, whether it's an offer, whether it's a marketing message, whether it's promotional, it's literally hyper specific. And some books I read are too general. And what I found was this had such specific examples and in very different things that would really bring it home for people. And I don't know why I'm doing it. The Art of Catching On. It starts with a C. My phone is with my producer who just walked out. I'll bring it up there. It's terrible.
It's okay. We'll make sure
that show notes will have it. We're late in the day here on the East Coast. My meetings have run together.
That's all good. What book are you reading right now?
Yeah. I just finished Tim's Story. So if you Google Tim's Story, he's actually the life coach of Oprah Winfrey.
No kidding.
Yeah. And Tim's amazing. And it's called the miracle mentality. And, I'm driven by faith. And it's not something that I kind of wear on my sleeve, but Tim does a really great job of kind of blending, those that have faith and those that are both successful and entrepreneurial and kind of bringing that together. But the miracle mentality by Tim Story, I'm about halfway through it. It's really great.
That's awesome. So we're coming to the end, and you and I could certainly hang out, but I want to leave people wanting more. And
I just thought of the book's name, Contagious.
Oh.
Contagious content. The Art of Why Things Catch On. Contagious. I did it.
You remember it now.
I did it. Yes. I knew it started with a C. It was driving me crazy.
That's awesome. For once, it wasn't my mom brain kicking in and then being like, hang on, I'll get back to you. That's so good. Anything you'd like to leave our listeners with?
No, the biggest thing is there's such an opportunity. You talked about social media, and I think in some ways people are fatigued with it, or they think that it's already been done, or it's too late or whatever. But the power of social media is really incredible, especially when you're building a personal brand where you're trying to build influence. And I think the opportunity to leverage that can't be overstated. And the same thing, whether you're a small business or a person, attention matters. And I think it's not about being popular or famous. It's about having influence. And that's the difference. This isn't about posting unreal photos or not being yourself. but it is about leaving a legacy and leaving behind a trail of what you believe and sharing knowledge and all of those things. And I think, but with that comes reward too, because that attention creates leverage. Leverage generates money somewhere down the road. And I think people need to embrace that better. And that's, I work every day with large clients, but the side gig, if you call it, is really helping people kind of embrace that. We have a master class that we do, part of the Radical Formula. Yeah. And we teach people on mindset and marketing. So I feel like there are two that are really tied together because, especially with personal branding, a lot of things with personal branding, I can teach you all day how to build a personal brand, but if your mind won't let you get out of your own way because of your predisposition to that, you'll never get there. And so Andy Murphy, who's a friend of mine, who's he's an neuro-linguistic programmer. He knows how to rewire your brain, NLP. And so we're teaching people how to get out of their own way and take advantage of all the opportunities from both removing the barriers of their mind, and then I'm teaching you what you do from there.
That's amazing. Well, we're definitely going to put a link down to that in the show notes if that's cool with you.
Yeah, definitely, please.
Yeah, one of the things
formula.com.
Beautiful. Thank you. One of the things I don't want to have happen with the podcast is people just to listen and then walk away without some sort of actionable next step. My own personal development journey, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was when you hear something, whether it's a training or a podcast or whatever it is, immediately go and implement one of two things. Just immediately. Even if you suck at it, go and implement it because it solidifies it, it brings it home. And, you can take a lot of notes or make, even today, we dropped some nuggets for people all the way through. So for the listener, right, grab something and just go put it into play. And that's amazing that you're
we've got a free Facebook group. We give away a lot of stuff for free. It's not just about the money, the levels and some of the trainings. There is a paid component, but again, there's a lot to learn. And, the biggest part is just getting into the community. So absolutely.
Beautiful. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for sharing space with me today. I appreciate it so, so much.
Thanks so much, Candice. You were great.
Oh, thank you. And for the rest of my listeners, you know the drill. Like, share, comment, follow. It really does make a huge impact for those of us who are taking the time to put this all together. And for the rest of you, we'll catch you on the flip side.